My wife secretly changed our daughter's last name. I found out at the hospital. I found out my daughter no longer had my last name while she was being taken into emergency surgery. That is the part people have trouble understanding. They assume there must have been a conversation, a form I forgot signing, some kind of misunderstanding. There wasn't. My wife changed our daughter's last name without telling me, and the name she chose belonged to a man I had never met. Our daughter, Sophie, was 7 when everything happened. She had been complaining about stomach pain for 2 days. At first, my wife, Laura, thought it was a stomach bug. Sophie had no fever and was still eating, so we told her to rest and drink water. Then, on Friday night, she collapsed in the hallway. I carried her to the car while Laura called the hospital. By the time we arrived, Sophie was pale, sweating, and crying whenever anyone touched her right side. The emergency room moved quickly. Blood tests, an ultrasound, a surgeon. It was appendicitis. Her appendix had probably already ruptured. Everything happened so fast that I barely understood what the doctors were saying. A nurse handed me a clipboard. We need a parent to verify the patient's information. I wrote Sophie's full name. Sophie Bennett. My last name. The nurse looked at the page. Then she looked at her computer. I'm sorry, she said. That's not the name we have. I thought she meant I had misspelled something. What do you have? She turned the screen slightly, though not enough for me to see everything. Sophie Callahan. I stared at her. No. Her name is Sophie Bennett. The nurse checked Sophie's date of birth. Then our address. Everything else matched. She's registered as Sophie Callahan. That's impossible. Laura was standing beside me. The moment I looked at her, I knew. She was not confused. She was terrified. Laura. She looked toward the treatment room. This isn't the time. My chest tightened. What isn't the time? Sophie needs surgery. Why does the hospital have a different last name for our daughter? Laura lowered her voice. I'll explain later. The nurse looked uncomfortable. She said they needed consent immediately because the surgeon was waiting. I signed where she told me to sign. I would have signed anything at that moment. They took Sophie through a set of double doors. The last thing she said was, Daddy, don't leave. I promised I wouldn't. Then the doors closed. I turned to Laura. Who is Callahan? She sat down. I remained standing. Laura, please lower your voice. Who is Callahan? She pressed both hands against her face. It's complicated. I almost laughed. People only say something is complicated when the simple explanation makes them look guilty. You changed Sophie's name? Yes. The hallway seemed to tilt. When? Last year. You changed our daughter's name a year ago? I was going to tell you. You had 12 months. I couldn't find the right time. And tonight felt better? I didn't know the hospital would still have it. I stared at her. What does that mean? She did not answer. That was when I realized the name change was only part of the secret. What exactly did you do? Laura stood. Can we please focus on Sophie? I am focused on Sophie. That is why I want to know why my own child has a stranger's last name. Callahan isn't a stranger. The words came out quietly. Too quietly. Who is he? Laura looked away. His name was Michael. Was. Not as. Was he your boyfriend? No. Your husband? No. Then who was he? She started crying. I didn't comfort her. I didn't know who she was anymore. Finally, she whispered, he was Sophie's father. I stared at her. For several seconds, I genuinely could not understand the sentence. Then the meaning arrived all at once. No. Laura cried harder. Daniel. No. I'm sorry. No, you're lying. I wish I were. I stepped backward. 7 years. 7 birthday parties. 7 Christmas mornings. 7 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school pickups, and whispered conversations after nightmares. I had been there when Sophie was born. I cut the cord. I held her while Laura slept. The nurse had placed her in my arms and said, Here's your daughter. Now my wife was telling me she had never been mine. Who was Michael Callahan? Laura wiped her face. He was someone I knew before we got married. We were together for 3 years before we married. I know. Were you sleeping with him while we were together? She nodded. Something inside me went completely quiet. Not calm. Empty. How long? Only a few times. How long? About 6 months. And you got pregnant? Yes. You told me she was mine. I didn't know. Did you ever check? Laura said nothing. Did you ever do a DNA test? Her silence answered me. When Sophie was 2. My knees nearly gave out. You have known for 5 years. I was afraid. You let me believe she was mine for 5 years after you knew? You are her father. That is not what you just said. You raised her. You love her. Biology doesn't erase that. You don't get to use love to excuse lying. People in the hallway were looking at us. I didn't care. I asked if Michael knew about Sophie. Laura nodded. He found me when she was almost 2. How? He saw pictures online. And he asked for a DNA test? Yes. You agreed? Yes. Without telling me? Yes. Every answer felt like another door closing. What happened after the test? He wanted to be involved. And you let him? Not at first. What does that mean? Laura sat down again. She said Michael had moved away shortly after their affair ended. He did not know she was pregnant. Years later, he returned to town and saw a photograph of Sophie on a mutual friend's page. He noticed the timing. He contacted Laura privately. They arranged a test. Michael was Sophie's biological father. At first, Laura told him to stay away. He threatened to take her to court. Then they reached an agreement. He could see Sophie occasionally as a family friend. My mind raced through every adult who had been around our daughter. Neighbors, teachers, coaches, friends from Laura's work. What did he look like? Laura pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she opened a photograph. The man in the picture looked familiar. I had met him. Not once. Several times. He was the man Laura introduced as her cousin Mike. He came to Sophie's 5th birthday party. He gave her a bicycle. He attended her kindergarten graduation. Once, he sat across from me at a barbecue and asked what it felt like to become a father. I told him it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. He smiled and said I was lucky. Laura watched us have that conversation. You brought him into our home. He wanted to know her. You made me shake his hand. I was trying to keep the peace. You let him watch me raise his daughter. He respected you. I turned away because I thought I might be sick. Then I remembered the hospital record. Why did you change her name? Laura hesitated. Michael got sick. What kind of sick? Cancer. He asked you to change her name? He wanted her to have something from him. So you erased mine? I didn't erase you. You removed my name from my daughter. It was important to him. What about what was important to me? You weren't supposed to find out like this. I laughed bitterly. How was I supposed to find out? She looked down. I don't know. Did Sophie know? No. Does she know Michael was her father? No. Then why change her name? Laura began explaining the legal process. I barely heard her. She claimed she changed the name through documents Michael's lawyer prepared. She said she signed forms stating that I had been notified. My attention snapped back. You forged my consent? I didn't forge your signature. What did you do? The attorney said because Michael was the biological father. I am listed on the birth certificate. I know. You cannot change a minor child's name without notifying both legal parents. Laura looked frightened. I thought the lawyer handled it. Did you lie to the court? She did not answer. That was when I knew this was bigger than an affair. Bigger than paternity. My wife had submitted legal documents behind my back. Before I could ask anything else, the surgeon came out. Sophie's appendix had ruptured, but the operation had gone well. She would need to remain in the hospital for several days. Everything else disappeared for a moment. I asked when I could see her. The surgeon said soon. Laura reached for my hand. I pulled away. When Sophie woke, she was groggy and frightened. The moment she saw me, she started crying. Daddy, I went to her. I held her hand and told her she was safe. She asked if I had stayed. I said, of course. Laura stood on the other side of the bed, crying silently. For the next 3 days, I did not leave Sophie except to shower. I slept in the chair beside her. I helped her walk to the bathroom. I read the same book 6 times because it was the only one she wanted. Laura and I barely spoke. Sophie noticed the tension. She asked whether we were fighting. I told her we were worried and tired. It wasn't a complete lie. On the second day, a woman from hospital billing came into the room. She asked us to confirm which insurance policy covered Sophie Callahan. I saw Laura tense. I said, please speak to me outside. In the hallway, the billing representative explained that Sophie had been added to another insurance plan the previous year. The subscriber was Michael Callahan. I felt cold. Is that why the hospital has his name? She said the records had been updated when the new insurance was submitted. I asked whether Michael had visited this hospital with Sophie before. The representative could not share much until she verified my authority. After checking the birth certificate and my identification, she confirmed that Sophie had been treated there twice under the Callahan name. Once for a broken wrist. Once for an allergic reaction. I knew about the broken wrist. Laura told me Sophie fell at a playground while visiting her sister. I had been on a business trip. Apparently, Michael had been there. The allergic reaction was completely new to me. When did that happen? 7 months ago. I remembered that weekend. Laura said she and Sophie were visiting her mother. My mother-in-law knew. The realization hit almost immediately. She had to know. Maybe Laura's sister knew too. How many people had watched me live inside a lie? That evening, I called Laura's mother. She answered cheerfully until she heard my voice. Then she became quiet. Did you know Michael was Sophie's father? She sighed. That was all I needed. How long? Daniel, this is not a conversation for the phone. How long? Laura told me after the test. 5 years. She was terrified of losing you. So all of you helped her lie? We were trying to protect Sophie. From what? From having her family destroyed. You mean from the consequences of Laura's choices. She made a mistake. An affair is a mistake. 5 years of secret meetings and forged court documents is a plan. My mother-in-law began crying. She said Michael deserved to know his daughter. She said I had always been a wonderful father. She said they believed there was room for both men in Sophie's life. Then why didn't anyone tell me? She had no answer. The next morning, I called an attorney. I expected him to tell me that because Sophie was not biologically mine, I had no rights. Instead, he said biology was only one part of the situation. I was listed on the birth certificate. I had raised Sophie since birth. I had acted as her father for 7 years. No court had legally removed my parental status. If Laura had changed Sophie's name without proper notice, the order might be invalid. He asked me to send every document I could find. I logged into our family computer while Laura was at the hospital cafeteria. I hated myself for doing it. Then I remembered she had hidden my daughter's identity for a year. I searched her email. The messages were still there. Thousands of them. Laura and Michael had been communicating for 5 years. At first, the emails were about Sophie. Photographs, school updates, medical information. Then they became personal. I found messages about their affair. Messages where Michael said he regretted leaving. Messages where Laura said she sometimes wondered what their life would have been like together. One message was sent 2 years earlier. Michael wrote, "Daniel is raising my daughter in my place." Laura replied, "He is a good father, but sometimes I feel like we are living the life that should have been ours." I had to close the laptop. I sat in the hospital parking lot and stared at the steering wheel. It was not only a secret paternity arrangement. Laura had never completely ended the relationship. Maybe they were no longer sleeping together. I didn't know. Emotionally, he had remained part of our marriage the entire time. I kept reading. The name change happened after Michael's cancer became terminal. He wanted Sophie to carry his last name before he died. Laura initially resisted. Then Michael's lawyer contacted her. The legal documents stated that I had abandoned the family. According to the petition, my location was unknown. I lived in the same house. I attended every school conference. I took Sophie to dance practice twice a week. But in court records, I had disappeared. Laura signed an affidavit claiming she had been unable to locate me. That was how the name change had been approved. I immediately sent everything to my attorney. Then I found an email dated 4 months earlier. Michael had died. Laura attended the funeral with Sophie. She told me they were visiting her mother that weekend. Sophie had stood beside her biological father's coffin without knowing who he was. Laura wrote to Michael's sister afterward. "At least she has his name now. Someday she'll understand." I closed the computer. When Laura returned to Sophie's room, I asked her to step outside. I read the emails. Her face went pale. "You invaded my privacy." I almost admired the audacity. "You told a court I abandoned my family." I didn't know the lawyer wrote it that way. "You signed the affidavit." I didn't read all of it. "You expect me to believe that?" I was grieving. "You attended his funeral." "Yes." "You brought Sophie. She deserved to say goodbye. She didn't even know who he was. She knew he cared about her. And you told me you were visiting your mother." Laura began crying. "I was trying to handle an impossible situation." "No. You were trying to keep everything you wanted." She looked at me. "You had me raising Sophie. You had Michael loving you from the side. You had your mother covering for you. And every time the truth threatened your life, you lied again. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair." She asked whether I planned to leave. I told her I did not know. That was true. My anger told me to walk away immediately. But every time I looked through the window at Sophie sleeping, I knew I could never walk away from her. Laura seemed to understand that. She said, "You'll always be her father." It sounded comforting. But underneath it was an assumption. She believed my love for Sophie would protect her from consequences. "I may always be Sophie's father," I said. "That does not mean I will always be your husband." Laura's face collapsed. She begged me not to make decisions while emotional. I asked where that concern had been when she signed an affidavit declaring me missing. 2 days later, Sophie was discharged. We went home together because I did not want to frighten her. Laura slept in the guest room. I slept on the couch near Sophie's bedroom in case she needed anything. The following week, my attorney filed an emergency motion challenging the name change. The court records were worse than I expected. The petition included a supposed notice mailed to an address where I had not lived in 10 years. The envelope was returned. Laura's lawyer then claimed my whereabouts were unknown. The judge approved the change without my involvement. When questioned, Laura insisted she trusted Michael's attorney and did not understand the process. The attorney denied misleading her. He produced emails showing that Laura knew exactly why the old address was used. One email from her said, "Daniel cannot find out until enough time has passed that changing it back would hurt Sophie." That sentence ended any chance of reconciliation. She had not planned to tell me. She planned to make the lie permanent. The judge reversed the name change. Legally, Sophie became Sophie Bennett again. But the paternity issue remained. Laura's attorney argued that Michael's DNA test proved I was not the biological father. My attorney argued that I was Sophie's legal and psychological parent. The court ordered another DNA test. I already knew what it would say. Still, opening the results hurt. Probability of paternity, 0%. I sat in my car for almost an hour. Then I picked Sophie up from school. She ran toward me, carrying a paper crown she had made in class. She hugged my waist and said, "Daddy, look." That word mattered more than the test. Laura and I began divorce proceedings. At first, she requested full custody. She said Sophie needed stability. My attorney nearly laughed when he read it. I had been the stable parent for 7 years. Laura had created secret medical records, hidden another father, and submitted false information to a court. The judge ordered temporary shared custody while the case was reviewed. Laura became furious. She said I was punishing her by taking Sophie. I told her parenting my daughter was not punishment. Then Laura did something I still struggle to understand. She told Sophie the truth without warning me. Sophie was 8 by then. She returned from Laura's house quiet and withdrawn. That evening, she asked whether I was her real dad. My heart broke. I sat beside her on the bed. "Where did you hear that?" "Mom said Mike helped make me." I had spent months working with a child therapist, planning how to explain everything carefully when the time was right. Laura destroyed that plan during one weekend. Sophie started crying. She said, "You might leave because I'm not yours." I pulled her into my arms. "I am not leaving you." But she said, "You aren't my real dad." I wanted to say something angry about Laura. I didn't. Instead, I told Sophie there were different ways to become a parent. Some parents help create a child. Some raise them. Some do both. I said Michael was connected to her by biology and that he had cared about her. Then I told her I had been her father every day since she was born. "Does that mean I can still call you Dad?" I had to look away for a moment so she wouldn't see me lose control. "Yes," I said. "Always." She asked why her name had changed. I told her adults had made decisions without explaining them properly. She asked whether Callahan was her real name. I said both names were part of her story, but no name changed who she was. A few weeks later, the therapist asked Sophie what name she wanted. She said Bennett. Then she asked whether Callahan could be one of her middle names. I was surprised. Part of me hated that name, but it belonged to her biological father. My anger toward Laura did not give me the right to erase Sophie's history. I agreed. Eventually, the court approved a legal name chosen openly and with everyone properly informed. Sophie became Sophie Callahan Bennett. Laura cried when the judge approved it. I did too, although for a different reason. The new name did not replace mine. It did not hide Michael. It told the truth. The divorce took almost a year. I received equal custody. The judge strongly criticized Laura's dishonesty, but did not remove her from Sophie's life. I did not want that anyway. Sophie loved her mother. Children should not lose a parent simply because that parent betrayed the other one. But the court ordered all major medical, educational, and legal decisions to be made jointly. Laura could no longer change documents behind my back. She also had to attend co-parenting counseling. My relationship with Laura's family ended. Her mother sent me a long letter apologizing. She said she convinced herself they were protecting everyone. I wrote back once. I said protection built on deception is only control wearing a kinder name. I never heard from her again. After the divorce, Michael's sister contacted me. Her name was Rebecca. She asked whether she could meet Sophie someday. My first instinct was to refuse. Then she sent photographs. Michael as a child. Michael with his parents. Michael holding the bicycle he later gave Sophie. There was a whole side of Sophie's family she knew nothing about. I met Rebecca alone first. She apologized. She said she had begged Michael to tell me the truth. He refused because he feared losing access to Sophie. Rebecca said Michael genuinely loved his daughter. He also accepted an arrangement that required deceiving me. Both things could be true. Eventually, Sophie met Rebecca. She learned about Michael slowly. She learned he loved music, hated tomatoes, and could never keep a plant alive. She learned he had been sick. She learned he was the man she once knew as Uncle Mike. That revelation made her angry. Not because he was her biological father. Because everyone had treated her like she could not handle the truth. "I wish they just told me," she said. I understood exactly how she felt. Sophie is 12 now. She uses Bennett at school. She keeps Callahan as her middle name. She has photographs of both families in her room. One shows Michael holding her at her 5th birthday party. Another shows me teaching her to ride the bicycle he gave her. For a while, that picture was difficult to look at. Now I see something different. Michael gave her the bicycle. I ran beside her until she learned to balance. Her story includes both of us. That does not diminish what I did. Fatherhood was never a prize I won because another man died. It was thousands of ordinary decisions. Waking up at night when she was sick. Packing lunches. Learning how to braid hair badly. Sitting through dance recitals. Apologizing when I was wrong. Staying when everything became painful. People sometimes ask whether I regret raising a child who was not biologically mine. The question makes no sense to me. I did not raise someone else's daughter. I raised Sophie. She was never the deception. The adults around her were. Laura and I are civil now. We communicate about school, medical appointments, and schedules. I do not hate her, but I will never fully trust her again. She says she was afraid the truth would destroy our family. In the end, hiding it did exactly that. The affair hurt. The DNA result hurt. Learning about Michael hurt. But none of those things destroyed our marriage by themselves. The destruction came from 5 years of calculated lies. From secret hospital visits. From forged legal notices. From watching me love Sophie while deciding I did not deserve the truth about her. I found out my wife changed our daughter's last name while Sophie was waiting for emergency surgery. At first, I thought the hospital had made a clerical error. Then I learned the name belonged to her biological father, a man who had been quietly standing at the edge of our family for years. Laura believed changing Sophie's name would give Michael a legacy. Instead, it exposed every secret she had built our marriage around. The court eventually changed the name again. This time, no one lied. No one disappeared me from the paperwork. No one decided what Sophie or I were allowed to know. My daughter carries both names now. One came from the man whose blood she inherited. The other came from the father who stayed. And every time she calls me Dad, I am reminded of something a DNA test could never measure. The truth changed her name, but it never changed who I was to her.